She ends up figuring out how to switch into her different lives and like take different times, different lives that she's lived throughout all of time. Fast forward and rewind and use these things to her advantage and try to accomplish things. It's crazy.
Time travel, one of the most fascinating concepts in both science and fiction. From jumping into the future to revisiting the past, it sparks endless curiosity. But is it just a dream, or could the science of time travel actually make it possible one day? Today, we're exploring the mind-bending theories, from wormholes to time dilation, and asking the big question, is time travel really within our grasp? All right, first things first. What do we mean when we talk about time travel? Well, simply put, it's the idea of moving through time just like we move through space. Sounds easy, right? But here's the thing. Time isn't as straightforward as we think. We live our lives 1 second at a time, always moving forward. But in theory, time travel could allow us to go backwards or forwards in ways that seem impossible. You've probably seen it in movies like Back to the Future or Doctor Who. It's fun, but when we ask, is it real? We need to dig into the science. And that brings us to the big brain behind it all, Albert Einstein. So, to understand time travel, we need to start with Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. It changed everything. Before Einstein, people thought of time as this steady, unchanging thing, like a clock that ticks the same way for everyone. But Einstein flipped that idea on its head. He showed that time is actually flexible. It bends, stretches, and even slows down, depending on how fast you're moving or how much gravity is around. Sounds crazy, right? But that's where things get interesting. According to Einstein, if you move fast enough, like really fast, close to the speed of light, time for you would slow down. So if you hopped in a spaceship and zipped around at near light speed, you could come back to Earth years later and barely have aged. Welcome to the world of time dilation. Time dilation is a real thing. We've actually seen it happen with astronauts. Up on the International Space Station, astronauts orbit Earth at about 28,000 kilometers per h. While they're up there, time runs slightly slower for them compared to people on Earth. It's only by milliseconds, but it's proof that time dilation exists. So technically, they're traveling to the future, just at a super tiny scale. Now imagine if we could take that effect and crank it up. If we could travel at 99% the speed of light, a journey that takes a few years for us could mean decades pass on Earth. It's not exactly a time machine like in the movies, but it's the closest we've got so far to time travel. All right, so time dilation might let us fast forward into the future, but what about going backwards or finding a faster route? That's where wormholes come in. Wormholes are like shortcuts through space-time. Picture the universe as a big sheet of paper, and you're on one side while the past or future is on the other. A wormhole would let you fold that paper and punch a hole through it, basically jumping across vast distances of space and time in an instant. Sounds awesome, right? But here's the catch. We've never found a real wormhole. They exist only in theory, and even if we could find one, we'd need an insane amount of energy to keep it open. Plus, there's the whole issue of avoiding black holes, which are notorious for destroying everything in their path. Now let's say, for argument's sake, that we could figure out how to travel through time. That brings us to a major issue: paradoxes. These are the what-if scenarios that can make time travel super confusing. For example, ever heard of the grandfather paradox? Imagine you travel back in time and accidentally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. Without them, you wouldn't exist, right? But if you don't exist, how did you go back in time in the first place? It's a loop that doesn't make sense, and it's one of the biggest headaches for scientists when they think about time travel. There are lots of theories about how to solve these paradoxes. Some suggest that traveling back in time might create a separate timeline or universe, so your actions wouldn't affect the one you came from. Others say time might have built-in safeguards to stop these paradoxes from happening at all. But honestly, we just don't know. Speaking of mind-bending ideas, let's talk about Kurt Gödel. He was a mathematician who found a weird solution to Einstein's equations that allowed for time loops. In Gödel's universe, if you traveled far enough in the right direction, you could loop back in time to where you started. It's like taking a walk around the block and ending up in the past. Now, Gödel's theory is a little out there, and most scientists agree it's not physically possible in our universe. But it's still fun to think about, right? The idea of time being a loop instead of a straight line opens up all kinds of possibilities. Let's talk about one more big idea, the arrow of time. In physics, the arrow of time is the idea that time only moves in one direction, forward. This is tied to something called entropy, which basically says the universe is always moving towards disorder. Think of it like this. You can scramble an egg, but you can't unscramble it. That's entropy in action, and it's why most scientists think we can't reverse time. Even though the math might allow for time travel, the laws of thermodynamics seem to put a hard stop on going backwards. It's one of the reasons that, for now, traveling to the past remains a pipe dream. Okay, I know I've hit you with a lot of science, so let's lighten things up for a sec. Time travel has always been a big part of pop culture. From Back to the Future to The Terminator, it's one of those ideas that captures our imagination. But let's be real. Most of what you see in the movies doesn't hold up to actual science. For example, in Back to the Future, Marty McFly jumps into a DeLorean and zooms back to 1955. Cool, right? But in reality, traveling back in time would be way more complicated, if it's even possible at all. Still, we love these stories because they tap into something deep in us, the desire to change the past or peek into the future. So after all this, the big question is, will time travel ever be possible? Honestly, we don't know. The science is still evolving. We've got some promising ideas like time dilation and wormholes, but nothing solid enough to let us hop into a machine and visit ancient Rome or the year 3000. The good news is that we're making progress. Theoretical physicists are constantly exploring the boundaries of what's possible. And who knows, maybe one day someone will crack the code and build the first real-time machine. So, is time travel possible? Well, kind of, but not in the way we see in the movies. The science suggests that traveling into the future might be doable, but going back to the past? That's still a huge question mark. Either way, the idea of time travel pushes us to think beyond the limits of what we know, and that's pretty exciting in itself. What do you think? Will we ever figure out how to travel through time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more mind-bending content. Until next time, stay curious.